question was, how did this all begin? That's how it began. It began because I was already involved in health and nutrition, as I would say, for so long. But then I had my mind completely reversed or opened to a whole new paradigm that I was not aware of at all. And then I started buying things, of course, at farmers markets, online, whatever, health food stores, whatever I could find. Immediately, raw milk disappears off the shelf. Altadena has raw milk disappears off the shelf. It's no longer available. Altadena has gone out of business 4 months after I discovered this. I'm yeah, exactly. I'm like, no!
No.
What am I going to do? When I walked into Whole Foods in San Jose, I was wandering around the store after I'd seen my daughter and my ex-wife, and I went to the dairy department, and lo and behold, there was a glass bottle of raw milk and raw cream on the shelf. And it wasn't from Altadena. And I walked over, and it said it was from a dairy called Claraville. And they said they were in Monte Sereno. I had no idea where Monte Sereno was. I went home, made myself a smoothie, found some raw milk, called Whole Foods back and said, hey, you don't happen to have the phone number to that dairy, do you? So they give me the phone number to the dairy, and I call the dairy, and it turns out it's 10 miles outside of San Jose. So I know, there's no mistakes. So I'm in a little auction car, because in 1997, I was broke and living in my car in the streets of Venice. I had nowhere to go. I was living on the garage floor of the person that introduced me to this information. So he helped me buy a little $800 Mazda RX, whatever it was, M3. It was a four-door little car with a broken windshield and no paint job and whatnot. And this is what I was driving up north. So I drive to the dairy, and I'm looking for a dairy in the middle of $1 million plus homes. And I'm thinking, this has to be the wrong address. How can the dairy, and I turn the corner and I see this street, and there's this little knoll and this little tiny shack, no bigger than this office, and I can't see what's actually up on top, and we're surrounded by $1 million homes. It's like the proverbial looking at the little house between the skyscrapers, okay? And I go and pull up the driveway, this gravel driveway, there's the little shack, and here's another little sort of building, and Ron Garthwaite, the owner of Claraville, walks out, and I introduce myself to him, and we start having a chat about everything. About how did he get involved. He was a former physicist. He had bought the dairy from Mr. Peak, who was 95 years old, and he was the person living in that little house over there, and he was still alive. And the dairy had been in business since 1927. And there was a little pond, a little pasture, and there was 8 cows.
And all the production came from all those 8
That's
cows?
right. He was only selling it in 3 stores. And since he had purchased the dairy a year and a half earlier, from the time I arrived there, he originally was just doing what Mr. Peak was doing, which was selling to people that would have come to the dairy to get some milk. But Ron decided that he was going to try to sell it locally at some of the health food stores. So he had already accomplished that. That's why I founded it at Whole Foods. So I'm like, okay, I'd like to, is there any way that I can sell well, first of all, how many cows do you have? My mind was in 50 different directions, thinking, I said, who else is legally producing raw milk in the state of California? He said, nobody. I said, what? He said, I'm the last person standing in the state of California that's legally licensed to produce raw dairy. I swear the hair stood on my arms, it still is right now. I was like, oh my God. Okay.